Hey, I want to welcome everybody back from Christmas. Hope you had a great Christmas day, a great Christmas break, enjoyed all the bowl games, ate a lot, returned a lot of gifts. Really glad that you are with us, especially if this is your first weekend back at any other time other than Christmas Eve. Maybe you came on Christmas Eve or you watched it online and now you're joining us again. We're so glad that you chose to come again. And I want to welcome everybody at Valencia, at Simi Valley, and also Canyon Country and those watching online on Facebook Live. Happy New Year to you all. And I'm so excited that we get to kick off this brand new series this weekend, simply entitled, What Happy Couples Know. And I want to thank our partners at North Point for so much help with this series. And it's going to be so helpful for every single one of us as we walk through this. And I know right now, some of you ladies are thinking, finally, a relationship series, and you've got your notebook out and your pencil and you're nudging the person beside you. Let me just tell you, just calm down for just a second, okay? And men, I know what you're thinking, and that is, I was just starting to like this place. Just calm down as well, okay? Before you grab your keys and head for the door, let me tell you kind of where we're headed. Let me just start off with a few disclaimers. First of all, ladies, you need to know this. You need to know that men think about relationships like you think about, let's say, a car. And that is, we don't want to work on it, we just want it to work. That's what we really want, right? We don't want to work on it, we just want it to work. And for us, when we hear things like, we need to fix this marriage, we need to fix our relationship, we think about when we were kids and our dad took our dog away and he came back with a cone around his neck and we heard that he had been fixed. And none of us want that. So let me just tell you, before you get in the car later on and you drive home and you say, well, let's start walking through this, or hey, let's go get dessert, and I'll talk the whole time about what you need to do different, just hold on, okay? Just give us a little bit of time. And guys, let me just say this to you. If the relationship is not broken, we tend to think, do we really need to talk about it? I mean, we're getting along, everything's fine, and there's not really an issue here. Why do we need to do maintenance on something that's not broken down? And the answer is, yes, we do. We still need to talk about it. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to have a lot of fun, but we're also going to dig into this issue of relationships. And let me just say this is for everybody who's either married or hopes to be married someday. So you might be single right now and there's no one on the horizon, but you hope one day to be married. Maybe you're in a relationship and you're not sure if that person is the one, and you haven't even changed your relationship status yet on social media, but you kind of have an idea that you want to be married. Maybe you're engaged right now. Maybe you're about to be engaged. Maybe you're newlyweds. Maybe you've been married for many, many years. Whatever the case is, this relationship will help, or this series will help your relationships. That's where we're headed throughout this. And so the only person this series is not for is for somebody who says, I'm never going to get married. So you get to sit back and relax and just think, boy, that looks like a lot of work, and that's why I'm never going to do that, okay? So this is for anybody who's married or hopes to be married. We're going to talk about what happy couples know. Now, I want us to kind of just spend a little bit of time just thinking about this whole concept as we get started here. We're going to spend 4 weeks on this, and I want you to think about it as basically one long message over 4 weekends, and today's kind of the introduction. Today we're going to get things started and just get your mind thinking about what's really going on behind your relationship or the relationship you hope to have. And we're going to start by looking at a box I have up here simply labeled hopes, dreams, and desires. Every single one of us has one of these. If you're single, you may not have thought a whole lot about what's in this box. It's just kind of intuitive to you. And one day you'll have to unpack this a little bit, but it's just kind of what you think about, or maybe you don't think about. If you're engaged, you're probably starting to think about this a lot. If you're newly married, you're probably dealing with this a lot. And for those of you that are married, you have to ask yourself, do you know what is in your box? Do you know what's in your spouse's box of hopes, dreams, and desires? And the answer is, most of us know a few, but not many of those things. And that's why this is so important for us to discuss. Because the issue with relationships is we bring with us a box of hopes, dreams, and desires. So let's just go through some of the stuff that's in this box here. All of us come with an idea of hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to money. and you've got an idea of how much money you need in order to just do life together in your relationship. Some of you have different ideas. You might think we need a lot of money, and you're just going to have to work to keep up with your hopes, dreams, and desires. Some of you think we don't need any money because we're just going to live on love, and love will keep us alive, and everything will be wonderful. We just don't need much. Some of you are thinking we're about to get married. That means double income, and we don't have any kids. Double income, no kids. This is going to be great. And one of you is thinking, now that we're going to get married, I get to stay home. Maybe you want to be a stay-at-home mom. Maybe you want to be a stay-at-home dad. Maybe you're going to have so much money that you think we don't even have to leave the house. We can just both be stay-at-home. But whatever the case is, all of us have an idea of what our hopes are for money, our dreams are for money, and our desires are for money. And a lot of times, it's not the same idea as our spouse. So our hopes, dreams, and desires have to deal with money. Here's another thing that we wrestle with, and that is, where are we going to live? Okay? For some of you, you think, you know what, we'll just move into my place, and one of you is thinking, no, we'll just move into my place, or maybe you think, well, I'll tell you what we can do, we should rent forever because we should never buy, and somebody else is thinking, no, that's the best investment that you have is to buy something, and then some of you are thinking, I think we should just get a camper and travel around, and then the rest of you sane people are thinking, we're not going to do that. So whatever the case, you've got a hope, you've got a dream, you've got a desire when it comes to where you live, and it's in the box. So we'll put that over here. Here's another thing. Now that we have that place to live, who's going to clean it? And you've got a hope, dream, or desire when it comes to this, and a lot of it's based upon how you were raised. Maybe you lived in a home where mom did all the cleaning, or maybe it was in that rare home where dad did all the cleaning, or maybe you hired it out and had a cleaning service come in. Maybe the kids were tasked to do all the cleaning, and you're thinking, we better have kids quick because this place is going to get pretty dusty over the next few years. And you're thinking, who's going to clean it? But you've got a hope, you've got a dream, you've got a desire when it comes to who will maintain this place we live in. Then it comes down to this. What are we going to drive? And some of us are thinking, well, I've got a sports car, so I'll just keep the sports car because she loved the sports car, and so I'm sure that this is going to be a perfect ride for us. And she's thinking, well, now that we're married, I'm going to get a sports car as well. And then one of you decides, well, if we're going to have kids, we got to get something that can actually fit a car seat in it, and so we better get a minivan or something more practical. But whatever the case is, you've got something in this box of hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to even this little thing of what you drive. Here's another thing. What about kids? How are we going to do that? Well, we've got the idea of, are we going to have a child? Right? Some of you are an only child, and you're thinking to yourself, I will never put my kid through that. They've got to have some siblings, and some of you had a ton of siblings, and you think one child is plenty. That's all I want. And so are you going to have one? Are you going to have two? And some of you are thinking, you know what? We're going to keep going until we finally have a boy. Why not have a whole basketball team while you're at it? So you got to talk to yourself and talk to each other about what are your hopes, dreams, and desires as it comes to kids, because we've got these ideas. Here's another thought. What about how you spend your time? I mean, right now, as a single person, you're thinking, I got all the time I want, I can do whatever I want. But if you're about to get into a married relationship, you've got to ask yourself, how am I going to leverage my time? How much time do we literally need to be together? And are we going to spend some time with my friends? I really don't want you to meet my friends. And how much time do I get to go out and spend time with my friends? Or how much time does she get to go out and spend time with her friends? And I really don't want to hang out with her friends. And what if we do couples dates? And I like the guy, she doesn't like the girl. So what do we do there? How are we going to manage our time? And whether you've ever talked about it or thought about it at all, you've got an idea, you've got a hope, you've got a dream, you've got a desire when it comes to time. And that leads us to the calendar, which is different than time because the calendar is where you kind of schedule out your time. Think about this. What are your hopes, your dreams, and desires when it comes to where you're going to spend the holidays? I mean, for some of you, you might be thinking, well, that's easy. I just need 3 of them. I need Christmas, I need Easter, and I need Mother's Day. That's it. The rest, he can have, not a problem, but now you're left with Groundhog Day and, Arbor Day or whatever. And so you got to think about what's your hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to the calendar and how that is used and how that is spent. Now, here's another thing. What about travel? Some of you are really interested in traveling the world. And you're thinking, I know that when I meet that special someone, they're going to be interested in travel as well. That's just natural, right? And that special someone might be thinking, I like the state of California. That's plenty. There's plenty to see here. You got the ocean, you got the mountains, you got the redwoods, you got the Lakers. What else do you need, right? And so you might have totally different ideas when it comes to your hopes, your dreams, and your desires when it comes to where you travel. Your idea might be, I need to see every baseball stadium. The other idea might be, I just need to see the inside of the mall. And you don't have a whole lot of hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to travel. But you've got an idea, and it's in the box. Here's another one. Your hopes, dreams, and desires about what your wife will wear to bed, or maybe not wear to bed. And I know that a lot of couples kind of go into this relationship and they get married and the wife thinks, well, he just wants me comfortable. And he's thinking, not necessarily, okay? So there's an idea when it comes to your hopes, dreams, and desires about even what we wear to bed. Here's another one. Your hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to how do we resolve conflict. Now think about this. You might think, well, we're just going to talk it out. And we're going to say whatever's on our mind. And the other person might think, well, that's not even kind. You shouldn't do that. I mean, I'm not going to tell you everything that I think is true. I'm going to tell you the things you need to know that are true. Because if I tell you everything, then that's just going to be this massive fight. Some of you grew up in homes where you yelled about it and then you got over it. Others of you, more passive-aggressive. You just swept it under the rug and you didn't deal with it until somebody was in therapy, right? And so you got to have an idea as to your hopes, dreams, and desires when it comes to conflict resolution. How are we really going to do that? What does that look like? What are your hopes, your dreams, your desires when it comes to conflict resolution? Because you've got them. You've got a fighting style. You've got an anger type that you have. The question is, do you know it? And here's another one. I don't even have really a prop for this, but it's just this question here. How are we going to treat each other? Because you have this idea, this hope, dream, and desire of how we're going to treat each other. And maybe that's we're going to talk about every aspect of our day, every single day. Maybe it's, I'll tell you if there's a problem. Maybe it's, you know what, I'm just loud and I raise my voice, but don't take offense to it. And maybe it's, I'm more quiet and I'm probably not going to share my feelings. But how do we treat each other? That goes in this box of hopes, dreams, and desires. And there's several things that factor what goes into this box. There's things about like what we've seen and what we've heard. There's things that we grew up with, that we saw in our home. There's things that we wrestled with in our life. There's things that we saw in our neighbors' relationships. There's things we've seen on TV and things you've read and things that people have modeled for you. And this goes into forming what goes in your hopes, dreams, and desires box. But then there's another one, and that is the things that we've experienced. You grew up in a home where everybody yelled. You grew up in a home where you saw people throw things. You grew up in a home where people just vented or they didn't say anything. And you're often reacting to the way you were raised as to determine what goes in your hopes, dreams, and desires box. Here's the reality for every single one of us. We are either trying to avoid something or we're trying to recreate something. You think about it. There are elements of your childhood that you liked that you put into this box. And then there are elements that you think, I don't like that, and you put the opposite into that box. And that becomes your hope, that becomes your dream, that becomes your desire, because it's what you view as the perfect way to do relationships. Now, at some point in that relationship, whether you're engaged, whether you're just dating, whether you're at the marriage altar, maybe it's a month, maybe after you're married, maybe a year after you're married, at some point along the way, and we can't help ourselves, we eventually take all these things in our hopes, dreams, and desires box, and we hand it to our spouse, and we say, here, make them come true. And suddenly, this box of hopes, dreams, and desires turns into expectations. And expectations are simply a strong belief that something will happen. And you think about it, this is in your mind. Well, this is why we fell in love, because I believed you were my best chance to meet all these expectations. This is why I was attracted to you in the first place, because I thought you would never wear something like this to bed. This is why I thought we would be such a good match, because our conflict resolution was the same way, or I thought yours would become like mine. And the problem with our hopes, dreams, and desires is they slowly become expectations for somebody else, and we hand it off to somebody else, and then we begin to simply believe they'll get to it eventually. It's a strong belief that something will happen. Now, it may not happen in the first month, it may not happen in the first year, but one day we'll get there, right, honey? We're working on that, right? You're going to get that raise, you're going to get that promotion, we're going to get that house, we're going to get that second house. You're working on it, you're going to quit that annoying habit that I've been telling you about. You're going to stop that, we're going to get the calendar figured out. You begin to think about all the things that they should be doing because they're living with the box that you handed to them, and they're doing the same with you. The problem is, anytime we attempt to recreate or avoid something from the past, it transforms hopes, dreams, and desires into expectations. And the reality is, for most of us, our marriage was simply us both bringing our box of hope, dreams, and desires to the marriage altar, and they collide. And when we collide, we swap boxes, and suddenly, what was your hope, dream, and desire turns into an expectation, which becomes somebody else's burden. And some of you know the weight of that because you're living with that right now. And you're thinking, boy, that's exactly what I've been trying to put my finger on. I'm not telling you anything brand new. You just haven't maybe been able to put words around it, but you're thinking, that's what I've been living with. And some of you have been in relationships for many, many, many years, and you're so unhappy and you're so frustrated, and you're thinking, that's why it is. I've been tasked with fulfilling all your hopes, dreams, and desires, and it feels like an expectation, and thus it feels like a burden. Well, what do we do when we reach this point in our life? Well, there's about 5 things that we could choose to do, and I'm going to walk through 4 of them, and then I'm going to give you the 5th one next week. And so let's just take a look at our responses to, now I've got this box of expectations that I'm supposed to do something about for you. Here's the first thing. The most extreme thing we could do is we just leave. We just bail. I'm out of here. You know what? This is not what I signed up for. You are not the person that I married. You are not the person I fell in love with. This is more than I bargained for. I didn't know this, or you didn't tell me, and this is not what I wanted to be a part of. You changed the rules. You switched gears. You switched lanes. And we take this idea of what we expected, and when somebody else doesn't fulfill it, or we feel like this burden has been put on us, eventually we just say, I'm done. And you know what we do when we say we're done? We leave and we take this box with us to the next relationship. That's why so many of our relationships feel like the one before, because we've still got the same box of hopes, dreams, and desires. And when somebody can't meet those expectations, we take that burden off of them and go put it on somebody else. We leave, and that's an option. And some of you have made that choice. Some of you regret that choice. Some of you are contemplating that choice, but it's an option. Here's the second thing that can happen. If we don't leave, maybe what happens for you is you win. In other words, you get to a point where you win in that relationship. And it's generally the person with a stronger personality, and it's not always, kind of aggressive, but oftentimes it's a stronger personality. And in these situations, this person just kind of just bows up and says, you know what, this is the right way. This is the right way. And the way that we do that is kind of 4 C's here. You convince, you convict, you control, or you coerce. Now think about that for just a second. Some of us, we convince, right? We just convince you, you know what? The way that you do that, it's just wrong, okay? And how do I know that? Because my mother never did it that way, and I know she's always right. Or the way that you think, that thought process you have, that's just irrational. And so you leverage your learning into that, and you convince them that they're wrong or you're right in some way. Because aren't people happier when you convince them to live life your way, I mean, it just really works out so much better for them, right? But this is what we do. We convince or we convict. We say things like, now I don't want to be critical, but I've seen your parents do this, and it's just so dumb. You know, it's just really, and we're not going to be that. We're just not going to do that. And so you begin to convict them of that's just the wrong way to do it. And their relationship is a wreck. We're not going to do that. Or maybe we control or we coerce. And at the end of the day, here's what begins to happen. There's a clear winner. And that winner's happy. And that winner thinks the relationship is great. And that winner thinks everything is fine. And no wonder they're always smiling because they've won. And we say things like, well, you know, he's coming along or she's getting better and it'll be all right. Just pray for them because they're not where I want them to be. But I'm trying to convince or convict or coerce or control so I can win. And the problem with this is we think this is the right way to do things. So we could leave. We could win, but here's the third response, and that is, it's just the opposite to the person who wins, and that is we conform. We become somebody we're not to compensate for somebody who won't love us. In other words, we've received their box of expectations, and they're not our dreams, they're not our hopes, they're not our desires, but in order to make things a little bit better, in order to make that person a little calmer and not blow up and not throw things up in our face and not try to win, then we'll just fulfill them. And we think, well, as long as she's happy, I'll just deal with it. As long as he's happy, I'll put up with it. It's not my dream, it's not my hope, it's not my desire, but you know what? It's theirs. And I'll just conform to what it is they need. But at the end of the day, in a relationship where somebody is simply giving up who they are to become somebody they are not, they lose respect for their partner, and their partner loses respect for them. And some of you might be living there right now. And then the fourth response is this, and that is we just compromise. We just compromise. In fact, for many people, they think that this is the goal, that this is the win. And perhaps you saw this with your parents where they weren't unhappy, they just weren't real happy. And they just got to a place where they just got along and they worked it out, or maybe you even said, you know what, they just eventually figured it out. They just made it work. Because in the compromised marriage, it's I'm going to do my part and you're going to do your part. And I'm going to keep an eye on you to make sure you do your part because I'm doing my part and I know you got an eye on me making sure that I do my part. And within a compromised marriage, there's scorekeeping. Everybody's keeping score. Everybody's keeping a record. We agree. This year was my year with my family, and don't even bring it up. And I know your dad's not well, but we're still going to do that. We're going to go there for Christmas. It's that kind of relationship, and in that kind of relationship, there is low trust. And when there's low trust, there's low intimacy. And here's why. Because you cannot be actually intimate with anyone you're not willing to fully give yourself to. And you will not fully give yourself to someone you don't completely trust. In fact, you can't give yourself fully to someone you don't completely trust. If you're single and you want to know the secret to great sex and marriage, it has nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with anything physical. It has everything to do with intimacy, and intimacy is tied to trust. And in a relationship that's characterized by any of these things, this whole conforming or winning or coercing or all these kind of things, something begins to happen inside where you begin to think, this relationship's fine, it's just not amazing. And that's because there's a lack of intimacy. It'll work, and you can go the distance, and you can even end your life being together, but there is a better way. The other thing about compromise is this, and this is a subtle thing. A compromised relationship is fueled by a commitment to the wrong thing. Now, when I say that, and when I tell you what this is, you're going to think, oh, that's crazy. This sounds bad, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it's actually fueled by a commitment to the relationship, which is the wrong thing. Have you ever heard this phrase before? You ever said this phrase before? I'm committed to my marriage. Well, here's the problem. You didn't marry a marriage. You married a person. I'm committed to the relationship. Well, you didn't date a relationship. You didn't marry a relationship. You dated, you married a person. And the problem is all you're committed to is the marriage. That's still back to you because that's your marriage. The commitment has to be to something bigger than that. And it's not a bad thing to be committed to a marriage or a relationship. It's just not the best thing, because the best thing is to be committed to that person. Wanting your marriage to be a good marriage is certainly better than wanting it to be a bad marriage, but there's something beyond that. And that's the fifth thing. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Now, let me just give you a glimpse of where we're headed. And it really comes down to this section of Scripture that we have in our New Testament, written in the first century by this guy by the name of the Apostle Paul, or Paul. And the Apostle Paul was somebody who had seen Jesus. And he also spent time around the disciples who had spent 3 years with Jesus. And he learned from them about the way that Jesus taught. And they recalled for him the way that Jesus boiled all the laws down to one thing, which was, you should love each other the way that I have loved you. In other words, move beyond being committed to the marriage, move beyond being in a contractual agreement. And this is the way you should love. And so when Paul sat down and wrote a letter to a church in a little town called Corinth, he wrote one of the most popular passages used in weddings today to help us understand what happy couples really know about love. Take a look at what Paul writes. He says, love, you want to know what love is? Love is patient and it's kind. And love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. And the moment I read these words, you think, yeah, that's in my hopes, dreams, and desires box. And that's what I expect out of my spouse. And that's what they expect out of you. But how do we get there? Because ultimately we're left with this box filled with stuff that we hope would one day happen, and dreams we hope would be fulfilled, and desires we hope that would come to play. But we just don't know how to get there. So let me frame this up one more time in a little bit of a different way, and we'll wrap this up. Expectations create a debt-to-debtor relationship. In other words, when I put all of my hopes and dreams and desires on you and expect you to do something for me, in that moment, I live under the assumption that you now owe me. In other words, I've committed my life to you, you've committed your life to me, and we're moving towards committing our lives to each other, which means these are my hopes, dreams, and desires, and you owe me to fulfill them. You are in debt to me. You owe me attention. You owe me to fully resolve the conflict. You owe it to me to make sure that I enjoy how we do the calendar and the money and the travel and everything else. You owe me affection. You owe me to pay the bills. You owe me to provide for me. You owe me to make sure the house is clean. You owe me to stay fit or stay in shape. You owe me patience. You owe it to me to play with the kids in the allotted amount of time. You owe kids to me. You owe me clean socks. You owe me, and I owe you. And even though both of us are in debt to each other, it creates a debt-debtor relationship, which is not ultimately what God had in mind. When He put the first man and the first woman together, He had something different in store. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what a man does, is what we say. That's what a woman does. That's what your role is. That's what my role is. That's what we're supposed to be about. And there's a debt-debtor relationship there that was never intended when God created us. So let me ask you this question. How much gratitude do you express to people who pay you what they owe you? None. because they owe you. And when you think your spouse owes you these things and they come to play in your life, you don't live with gratitude. You live with well, of course you should have. And here's the part that's so tricky about being with the same person for many, many, many years, is you eventually begin to take those things for granted. In every relationship, there are certain roles that each person takes on. It's just natural. It's what we do. One person's better at this. One person's better at the bills. Another person's better at taking care of the home. Another person does this, or whatever it is. And after a while, you stop saying thank you, because it then becomes an expectation fulfilled. And this is why gratitude is such a huge part. Because when you start to look at somebody else and say, you know what, I know you do that for me every single day, but thank you, then it suddenly breaks the bondage of you owe me. The other thing about this debt-debtor relationship is a debt-debtor relationship eliminates the possibility of unconditional love, because you just begin to expect things to happen. There's no margin in there to say, wow, look what you did. Everything they do, you think, well, of course you should. You are my spouse. Expectations actually remove the margin necessary for love to be recognized and appreciated. Now, the good news is you don't have to live that way. You don't have to live with those kind of expectations, and because I know something that happy couples know, and I'm going to tell you next week what it is. But let me give you a couple things to process. The first one is this. What should we do with this box? What do we do with our box of hopes and dreams and desires? Do we just pretend they're not even there? You know what, I never really wanted kids, or you know what, I don't really need to travel, or you know what, you can have all the holidays. The best way to answer that is to answer this question. What do they owe you? And happy couples know this. Happy couples know that they owe each other everything, but are not owed anything in return. The problem that you and I have is we carry around this box and we still wonder, what do I do with it? Because I still have a desire to travel. I still feel like God has given me some gifts that I should use. I still feel like I have a vision for what I want to do with my life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the question is that your spouse's responsibility? And if you begin to think that they owe you, it diminishes your relationship. Happy couples know that they owe each other everything, but are not owed anything in return. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but this is the way Jesus summed it up. He says, as I've loved you, you're to love one another. Now, maybe you've heard the phrase before, the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which kind of gets us back to this I owe you, you owe me kind of relationship. Jesus takes it another step further, and he says, I want you to love each other the way that I loved you. How did Jesus love you? He died for you. He gave up all of his hopes, dreams, and desires because of you. He gave up everything for you. And in the end, you both won through the process. And Jesus says, this is the way I want you to think about the other person. This is the way you are going to be able to discover what happy couples know. And this is what we're going to drill down into over the next few weeks. So before we get into that, I want to give you a couple pieces of homework to do this next week. And it's really just two questions. The first question is this. What's in your box of hopes, dreams, and desires? You see, for a lot of us, we just don't even know. We've got them, but we just don't even know. And we get mad at the person in our relationship, and we don't know why. It's because they're not recreating what we want out of our box, or they're bringing something back that we were trying to avoid, or they're doing something different than we would do it. And then we end up trying to control or coerce. And the problem is it never gets us to where we want to go. And you have to start with, what is in my box of hopes, dreams, and desires? And here's the second question. Are you asking someone else to carry it around for you? Are you expecting someone to carry it for you right now? And maybe that's a friend, maybe that's somebody you're dating, maybe that's somebody you're engaged to, maybe it's a spouse, and maybe you've been doing this for years. You just never thought about it that way. And every time they do something good for you, you think, was that in the box? Yeah, that was there. Good job. And you've lost the gratitude because you're expecting someone to do that for you. What's in the box? And are you expecting someone to carry it around for you? We're going to pick it up there next week. So I invite you to be here. I should enjoy this online, share this online, bring a friend with you as we move into part 2 of What Happy Couples Know. Let's pray together. God, thank you for your incredible love for us. Thank you for the gift of relationships. Thank you for modeling for us how that should be done by this laying down of everything, all rights and hopes and dreams and desires, for Jesus to give his life for us so that we could have a relationship with you and thus be prepared for relationship with each other. So God, may we love the way that you have loved. And would you help us to come just very honest with ourselves as to what our hopes and dreams and desires are, many of which are good things and many of which are God-given. But God, we often project these onto others. So God, would you just teach us what that is? And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.